The smell hit David Reed before he even opened the door to his new classroom. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. No garlic, no roasted spices, no butter browning in a pan. Just sterile, recycled air that smelled faintly of metal and cleaning solution. He pushed through the entrance of the Galactic Culinary Institute and stopped dead. This was supposed to be a kitchen. Instead, it looked like a hospital operating room had a baby with a chemistry lab. Smooth white surfaces everywhere. Glowing blue panels lined the walls. Strange machines hummed quietly, their purposes completely unknown to him. Not a single stove, oven, or even a cutting board in sight. You must be the human. The voice came from behind a towering machine that looked like it could launch satellites. A tall, thin alien stepped out, his skin the color of deep ocean water. 3 eyes blinked at David in sequence. I am Instructor Calvin, head of this department. Your workspace is Station 7. David walked to the indicated spot. A flat metal table sat there with a single glowing screen embedded in its surface. He touched it and watched as holographic menus appeared, showing thousands of dishes. Each one had nutritional breakdowns, calorie counts, and efficiency ratings. He tapped on something called Earth Protein Disc and watched as a panel opened in the table. A perfectly round, beige patty rose up on a small platform. Is this supposed to be a hamburger? David asked. Correct. Molecularly identical to your species' traditional food item. Optimal nutrition, zero waste, prepared in 3.2 seconds. Calvin's middle eye focused on David with what might have been pride. Far superior to your primitive methods. David picked up the patty. It had the right texture, sort of the right weight, maybe. But when he took a bite, it tasted like absolutely nothing. Not bad, just absent. Like eating flavored air that happened to be solid. Where are the actual kitchens? David asked. Calvin's 3 eyes widened. This is the kitchen. We abandoned dangerous cooking methods 7,000 years ago. No fire, no sharp implements, no bacterial contamination. Pure efficiency. The door whooshed open and students began filing in. David had seen plenty of aliens during his journey to Station Harmony 7, but this group was something else. A massive insect creature with 6 arms clicked its way to a front row seat. A being made entirely of floating purple mist drifted through the doorway. A small, rabbit-like alien with huge ears nervously took a spot near the exit, her pink skin already flushed with anxiety. Welcome, students, Calvin announced. This is David Reed, visiting from Earth. He will demonstrate primitive food preparation, which you should view as historical curiosity only. These methods are inefficient and dangerous. Do not attempt to replicate them. 15 faces, or face equivalents, stared at David with expressions ranging from confusion to outright concern. The rabbit alien raised a trembling paw. Will there be fire? She asked in a tiny voice. Well, yeah, David said. Cooking kind of requires heat. She looked ready to faint, the floating mist being made a sound like wind through distant caves. The insect creature clicked rapidly, which David's translator rendered as nervous laughter. David opened his backpack and pulled out a small portable camp stove, a pan, butter, bread, and cheese. Simple ingredients for the simplest dish he knew. The students leaned back as if he had pulled out a bomb. Relax, David said. I'm just making a grilled cheese sandwich. He turned on the camp stove. A small blue flame appeared. 3 students immediately stood up and backed toward the door. The rabbit alien squeaked in terror. The insect creature's antennae vibrated so fast they blurred. Fire! Someone screamed. Alarms erupted throughout the room. Red lights flashed. A computerized voice repeated, uncontrolled combustion detected. Evacuate immediately. Security has been notified. It is just a cooking flame, David shouted over the noise. Completely under control. The door burst open and 4 security officers charged in, wearing full protective suits. They pointed scanning devices at David's tiny camp stove like it was a nuclear reactor about to melt down. Sir, extinguish that flame immediately, the lead officer barked. His translator made his species' natural growl sound even more threatening. Calvin rushed over, his face cycling through several shades of darker blue. I warned administration this would happen. Reed, You're done here. This is completely unacceptable. But something strange was happening. Despite the chaos, despite the alarms and the security officers, most of the students had not fled. They were watching David with intense focus. The insect creature had moved closer, not farther away. The floating mist being had descended until it hovered just above David's stove. David had already put butter in the pan. The smell of it melting and starting to brown filled the air. He saw alien nostrils flare. Sensory organs he could not even identify seemed to twitch and orient toward that smell. "What is that?" the mist being whispered. David slapped the sandwich into the pan. The sizzle made several students jump, but none of them left. He pressed down with his spatula, watching the bread turn golden brown, watching the cheese begin to melt. He flipped it once, pressed again, then slid it onto a plate. "Food," David said simply. He cut the sandwich into small pieces and held out the plate. Security was yelling. Calvin was making angry calls to his superiors. The alarm still screamed. But the rabbit alien crept forward on shaking legs, reached out one small paw, and took a piece. She bit into it. Her enormous ears shot straight up. Her eyes went wide. She made a sound that David's translator could not quite process, something between a gasp and a song. "It tastes like something," she whispered. "It actually tastes like something." The insect creature surged forward and grabbed a piece with one of his arms. His clicking became musical. The mist being absorbed the aromatic steam rising from the sandwich and shimmered with colors David had never seen before. Within seconds, every piece was gone. The students stood there, looking at David like he had just performed magic. Security dragged him out of the classroom. Calvin filed 17 separate safety violations. The administration held an emergency meeting about the dangerous human and his primitive fire. But late that night, David's station communicator buzzed. A message appeared from an unknown sender. "Please do not leave. We want to learn. Cargo Bay 7. Midnight. Come alone. Bring more food." It was signed by 15 different students, including the terrified rabbit alien whose name, he now learned, was Rila. David looked at the message for a long time. Then he smiled and started making a shopping list. Cargo Bay 7 had been abandoned for years. Dust covered everything. Broken shipping containers lined the walls. The lighting panels flickered every few seconds, casting strange shadows across rusted metal floors. David hauled his supplies through the doorway and found 15 nervous aliens waiting for him in a rough circle. Rilla stood at the front, still trembling but determined. The massive insect creature, who introduced himself as Gorth, helped David unload boxes. The floating mist being called Lynn hovered near the ceiling, keeping watch for security patrols. "This is crazy," said one of twin aliens who looked like walking crystals. His name was Nyx. His brother Tox nodded in agreement. "If we get caught, they will expel us." "Then we better not get caught," David said, pulling out a portable cooking burner. "Who here has ever used a knife?" Silence. 15 students looked at each other in confusion. "You know a blade for cutting food?" David held up a simple kitchen knife. "That is a weapon," Gorth clicked nervously. "Weapons are forbidden in food preparation." David sighed. This was going to be harder than he thought. "Okay, forget knives for now. Let's start with something simple. We're making soup." He set up his burner and put a large pot on it. The students backed away when he lit the flame, but this time they did not run. Progress. David added oil to the pot and waited for it to heat. "What are those?" Rilla asked, pointing at the vegetables David was chopping on a cutting board. "Onions, carrots, celery. Basic soup vegetables." He tossed them into the pot, and the sizzling sound made everyone jump. But then the smell started to rise. Gortha's antennae shot straight up. Lynn descended rapidly, swirling around the pot. Rilla's nose twitched like crazy. Even the twins, who claimed they did not need to eat organic matter, drifted closer. "What is happening to the air?" Tox asked. "That is called aroma," David explained. "When you heat ingredients, they release compounds that you can smell. That is how you know something is cooking properly." He added broth, herbs, and let everything simmer. The cargo bay, which had smelled like rust and neglect, now smelled like a kitchen. A real kitchen. The students crowded around the pot, mesmerized by the bubbling liquid. Can we try? Rilla asked. David handed her a long wooden spoon. She stirred the pot carefully, her pink skin flushing darker with concentration. When she tasted a small sip, her whole body seemed to light up with joy. My turn, Gorth clicked, reaching for the spoon. They passed it around, each student tasting and reacting. Some laughed. Some made sounds of surprise. Lynn absorbed some of the steam and changed colors from purple to warm orange. This is better than yesterday, the mist being said. More complex. Layered. That is because we built the flavors step by step, David explained. First, we cooked the vegetables to bring out their sweetness. Then we added liquid and herbs. Each step matters. You cannot just synthesize this in 3 seconds. The twins looked at each other with their crystalline faces reflecting the pot's steam. We could try to improve it, Nick said. Add some chemical reactions to enhance the molecular bonds. No, David said firmly. No chemistry experiments. Just cooking. But the twins were already pulling out small vials from their bags. Before David could stop them, Tox dumped something green and glowing into the soup. The liquid immediately began to bubble violently. Get back, David yelled. The soup exploded upward in a fountain of boiling broth. Everyone scattered. Lynn formed a protective barrier of mist. Gorth grabbed Rila and pulled her away from the splashing liquid. David threw a lid on the pot, but too late. Soup covered the ceiling, the walls, and most of the students. The cargo bay door slammed open. A massive alien in a security uniform stood there, his scales dark gray and scarred from old battles. Officer Strand looked at the chaos, at the illegal cooking equipment, at the soup dripping from everywhere. What happened here? He demanded. Everyone froze. This was it. They were caught. But then Strand sniffed the air. His eyes, small and reptilian, focused on the pot. Is that soup? Yes, sir, David said quietly. Just a cooking accident. Strand walked to the pot and looked inside at what remained. He reached in with one clawed finger, tasted it, and his expression changed completely. My grandmother made something like this, he said softly. Before the regulations. Before everything became efficient and safe and boring. He looked at the terrified students. How often do you meet here? This is only our second time, Rila squeaked. Strand was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his security tablet and made some notes. I'm logging this as a false alarm. Faulty sensor readings in abandoned cargo bay. Nothing to investigate. He looked directly at David. But next time, maybe teach them about temperature control before letting them add random chemicals. The twins looked ashamed. Sorry, they said together. Also, Strand continued, you might want to bring some medical supplies. Just in case. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. And if you happen to make extra soup sometime, I patrol this sector every third shift. After he left, the students erupted in excited chatter. They had not been arrested. Better yet, they had an ally. We need to be more careful, David said, cleaning up the mess. But we also need to keep learning. Real cooking has risks. Burns happen. Things explode sometimes. But that is part of the process. Over the next few weeks, the secret cooking class grew. Word spread through the student population. Aliens David had never seen before started showing up. They learned to chop vegetables, even though they were scared of knives. They learned to taste and adjust seasonings. They burned things and made messes and occasionally set off fire alarms in distant parts of the station. A gentle doctor named Yenna started attending every class, bringing bandages and burn cream. She never cooked herself, but watched everything with careful attention, taking notes on her medical tablet. Then one night, Calvin appeared in the doorway of Cargo Bay 7. Everyone went silent. This was definitely the end. But Calvin did not call security. He walked to where David was teaching Rila how to make bread dough. He watched her knead the soft mixture, her small paws working the dough with growing confidence. I have been ordered to issue you a challenge, Calvin said to David. The Galactic Food Symposium happens in 6 weeks. You will compete against proper, efficient food preparation. When you lose, you must leave this station and never return. And if I win? David asked. Calvin's 3 eyes narrowed. You will not win. The judges only care about nutrition and efficiency. Your primitive methods cannot compete. After Calvin left, the the students gathered around David. "You cannot do this," Gorth clicked. "The competition is designed for synthesizers. They will never judge real cooking fairly." David looked at his students, at their worried faces, at the half-made bread Rila still held in her paws. "Then we will just have to change their minds," he said. 5 weeks until the symposium. David stood in Cargo Bay 7, surrounded by chaos. Gorth was trying to flip pancakes with 4 arms at once and failing spectacularly. The twins were arguing about whether adding quantum particles to chocolate would improve the flavor. Rila had accidentally made her sauce so spicy that 3 students needed Dr. Yena's emergency treatment. "We are not ready," David admitted to Lynn, who floated beside him observing the disaster. "None of us were ready when we started," the mist being replied. Rila could not even touch a hot pan. "Now look at her." David watched as Rila, despite the spice disaster, confidently adjusted her recipe and started over. Her pink skin no longer flushed with fear around the stove. She had learned to trust herself. "The symposium will not care about personal growth," David said. "They want numbers. Efficiency ratings. Nutritional data. Then we show them what the numbers cannot measure," Lynn said. That night, a young journalist named Besh arrived at the cargo bay. His species had tentacles instead of arms and 7 eyes arranged in a circle around his head. He carried recording equipment and wore an expression of deep skepticism. "I'm doing a story on the human who thinks fire is better than science," Besh said. "Give me one reason why this is not complete madness." David handed him a plate of food. Fresh pasta with vegetables and herbs. Simple, but made with care. Besh ate it slowly. His tentacles stopped moving. His 7 eyes all focused on the plate at once. "I have eaten synthesized pasta thousands of times," he said quietly. "This is different." "Why is this different?" "Because someone made it," David said. "Not a machine following formula. A person who learned, who practiced, who cared about the result." Besh recorded everything that night. The students cooking together, helping each other, laughing when things went wrong. He interviewed Gorth about why his entire hive was now obsessed with human cooking techniques. He watched Rila teach a new student how to properly season food. When his story went live on the station news network, everything changed. The response was immediate and divided. Half the station thought David was dangerous. The other half was curious. Hundreds of messages flooded his communicator. Most were from aliens who remembered when their own species used to cook, before efficiency became the only goal. But then the threat started. "You are disrupting the food economy," one message read. "Stop now or face consequences." They came from anonymous sources, but Dr. Yena recognized the signature markers. "This is from the consortium," she said, showing David the message analysis. "They manufacture all the food synthesizers in this sector. If real cooking becomes popular, they lose trillions in profits." "Let them complain," David said. "What are they going to do, ban cooking?" 3 days later, someone broke into Cargo Bay 7 and destroyed half the equipment. Ovens were smashed. Ingredients were contaminated. A chemical substance had been poured over everything, making it unsafe to use. David arrived to find his students already cleaning up the mess. Gorth used his multiple arms to haul broken equipment. The twins were analyzing the chemical to find a neutralizer. Rila was crying but still working, carefully salvaging what could be saved. "We can replace this," David said. "It is just stuff." "But the symposium is in 2 weeks, Rila sobbed. "We have no time to rebuild." Officer Strand appeared in the doorway, carrying boxes. "Good thing I confiscated some illegal cooking equipment last week," he said with a slight smile. "No idea how it ended up on a cart outside this cargo bay." Behind him, Dr. Yena arrived with more supplies. Then other students who had never even taken David's class showed up with donations. Even some station workers brought spare parts and tools. "The consortium thinks they can scare us," Strand said. "But they forgot something important. People protect what they love." They spent the next week rebuilding and practicing. David worked his students harder than ever, not just on technique, but on understanding why they were doing this. Why cooking mattered beyond just eating. "Food is connection," he told them during a late-night session. "When you cook for someone, you're giving them more than nutrients. You're giving them time, attention, and care. You cannot synthesize that in 3 seconds. The symposium announced new rules. Competitors could only use approved ingredients, which were all bland and identical. Standard equipment only, which meant no real stoves or ovens. Temperature limits that made actual cooking impossible. They're trying to make you fail, Ambassador Holloway told David. The Earth representative had been avoiding him for weeks, worried about political complications. But now she stood in Cargo Bay 7, watching students work. These rules are specifically designed to prevent real cooking. I know, David said. So you will withdraw from the competition? No, David said. I'm going to break every single rule. Holloway's eyes went wide. That is political suicide. Earth's reputation will be destroyed. They might ban humans from this entire sector. Maybe, David agreed. But these students deserve better than a galaxy that only values efficiency. Someone has to show them that. The night before the symposium, Dr. Yenna revealed her secret research. She projected data across the cargo bay wall, showing chemical analyses of the students' health over the past months. Everyone in this cooking class shows improved mental health, she explained. Better social bonding markers, reduced stress hormones. Even physical health has improved, despite the occasional minor burn. Why? Gorth clicked. Because you're learning together, Yenna said. Creating together, failing together, and trying again. Synthesizers give you food, but this gives you community. Besh recorded everything and published it immediately. By morning, the story had spread across the station and beyond. The consortium tried to suppress it, but the data was solid. Messages poured in from across the galaxy. Other species sharing memories of their own lost cooking traditions. Elderly aliens who remembered when food meant more than just fuel. David read them with his students gathered around. Tomorrow we cook, he told them. And whatever happens after that, we cook. Because this is bigger than one competition. This is about remembering what we lost when we gave up on making things ourselves. Rilla raised her small paw. Will we really break all the rules? David smiled. Every single one. And we will do it together. The students cheered. Outside Cargo Bay 7, the station hummed with anticipation. The consortium prepared their countermeasures. Ambassador Holloway drafted her resignation letter, knowing she would probably need it. And in his quarters, Calvin stared at an old photograph of himself as a young student, covered in flour, laughing with classmates in a kitchen that no longer existed. Tomorrow would change everything. The Grand Symposium Hall could hold 3,000 beings. Every seat was filled. Representatives from 40 species crowded the auditorium, and thousands more watched on broadcasts across the galaxy. This was supposed to be a routine event showcasing efficient food technology. Instead, it had become the most anticipated spectacle in recent memory. David stood backstage with his students while other competitors demonstrated their synthesizers. Each presentation was exactly the same. Press a button, wait 3 seconds, receive perfectly balanced nutrition in disc form. The judges nodded approvingly and recorded efficiency scores. You were scheduled last, an official told David. You have 15 minutes. Gorth helped David wheel out a cart loaded with cooking equipment. Real pots, real pans, real ingredients. The audience went silent when they saw it. Several judges stood up immediately. This is not approved equipment, the head judge announced. She was ancient, her species living for thousands of years. Her name was Keeper Solace, and her word was law in culinary circles. You must use standard synthesizers only. With respect, Keeper Solace, David said, I am here to demonstrate human cooking methods. Those require this equipment. Calvin jumped up from his seat in the audience. I demand immediate disqualification. This human is violating safety protocols. Ambassador Holloway stood as well. The rules state that each species may demonstrate their traditional food preparation. For humans, this is our tradition. The judges argued among themselves. The audience buzzed with conversation. Finally, Keeper Solace raised one hand for silence. We will observe only, she declared, but we will not taste anything prepared with such dangerous methods. The human may proceed as educational demonstration, but this cannot be judged as valid food preparation. David nodded. He had expected this. That is fine. I just asked that you watch. He lit his portable stove. The flame appeared, and half the audience gasped. Security officers moved toward the stage, but Keeper Solace waved them back. Let him continue, she said. We are observing primitive methods. Nothing more. David began cooking. He had planned a simple menu. Fresh bread, roasted vegetables, a protein dish, and chocolate cake for dessert. Basic human comfort food. Nothing fancy. But as he worked, something happened. The smells began to fill the massive auditorium. Butter browning in a pan. Garlic sizzling in oil. Bread baking until golden. These were aromas most of the audience had never experienced in their entire lives. People in the back rows stood up to get closer. The floating camera drones descended, trying to capture what they were detecting. David's translator picked up dozens of languages, all asking the same question. What is that smell? Rilla stood beside David, helping him plate the food. She moved with confidence now, her fear replaced by pride. Gorth kept the ingredients organized with his multiple arms. Lynn created gentle air currents that carried the aromas throughout the hall. The judges sat rigid in their chairs, trying to maintain professional distance. But David saw their sensory organs orienting toward the stage. Noses twitched, eyes dilated. Some species did not even have traditional smell receptors, but they were reacting to something in the air. Then disaster struck. David was searing the protein in a hot pan when some oil splattered. A small fire started on the edge of the stove. Not dangerous if handled properly, but in this environment it might as well have been an explosion. Alarms erupted. Security rushed forward. 3 judges demanded immediate evacuation. Calvin was shouting about safety violations. The consortium representatives in the audience were already recording everything, preparing to use this as evidence that human cooking was too dangerous. But David calmly grabbed a lid and placed it over the pan, cutting off the fire's oxygen. The flames died immediately. He looked at the panicking audience and spoke into his microphone. This happens sometimes when you cook with real heat, he said simply. You handle it and move on. He continued cooking as if nothing had happened. The security officers did not know what to do. Keeper Solace had not ordered evacuation, so they just stood there awkwardly. David finished his dishes and arranged them on plates. The food looked simple compared to the perfectly geometric synthesized meals from earlier demonstrations. But the smell was overwhelming. I cannot force you to taste this, David said to the judges. But my students can verify it is safe. Rilla stepped forward first. She took a piece of bread, still warm from the oven, and ate it in front of the entire galaxy. Her pink skin flushed with pleasure, and her huge ears stood straight up. It is safe, she announced, and it is wonderful. One by one, David's students came forward. Gorth, the twins, Lynn absorbing the aromatic compounds. Even Officer Strand walked up from the audience and took a plate, eating it while in full uniform. I will vouch for the humans' food, Strand announced. I have been eating it for weeks. The judges were whispering among themselves. Some looked angry. Some looked confused. But a few looked curious. One judge, a small being with blue fur, kept glancing at the plates of food. The rules clearly state we cannot taste unapproved food, this judge said. But his sensory whiskers were vibrating like crazy. Another judge stood up to leave, but she passed too close to David's table. The smell of chocolate cake hit her directly. She stopped walking. Her entire body went still. This judge was from the same species as Keeper Solace. Ancient, wise, and supposedly above such base things as being tempted by food. But she turned back toward the table. May I? She asked quietly. Before Keeper Solace could object, the judge took a small piece of cake. She ate it slowly. Then her eyes, which had been dull with age, suddenly brightened. Tears began flowing down her face. I remember, she whispered. My grandmother made something like this. Before the regulations. Before we decided efficiency was more important than joy. She turned to the audience, tears still streaming. I had forgotten that food could be more than fuel. I had forgotten the taste of something made with care. Keeper Solace stood abruptly. This demonstration is over. Clear the hall immediately. But it was too late. Other judges were already reaching for the food. Members of the audience were moving toward the stage. The security officers, instead of pushing people back, were asking David if there was enough for them to try. Then the alarms went off again, but this time much louder. The station's main evacuation system activated. Automated protocols began sealing sections of the symposium hall. All personnel evacuate immediately, the computer voice announced. Critical safety failure detected. This is not a drill. The consortium representatives smiled as chaos erupted. Their plan was working perfectly, but they had not counted on what would happen next. The evacuation siren screamed through the symposium hall. 3,000 beings scrambled for exits. Security tried to maintain order, but the panic was overwhelming. David grabbed his students and pulled them toward a side door. This was not an accident, Officer Strand growled, checking his security tablet while running. Someone triggered the evacuation protocols manually. They reached the station command center, where controllers were frantically trying to understand what was happening. The screen showed red alerts across multiple systems. But Strand noticed something odd. These failures are following a pattern, he said, pointing at the screen. They're not random. Someone programmed this. A technician pulled up the system logs. The triggers came from an external source. Someone hacked our safety systems. Besh was already recording everything. His 7 eyes scanned documents while his tentacles worked multiple screens at once. I am finding encrypted communications between the consortium and someone inside station management. They planned this. Within an hour, the evidence was clear. The consortium had sabotaged the station's safety systems to frame David for causing a disaster. They had been planning it for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment during the symposium. But their plan had a flaw. They assumed everyone would blame the human with his dangerous fire. Instead, people were angry at being manipulated. They tried to destroy the symposium just to discredit one cooking class. A council member demanded. That is insane. News of the conspiracy spread instantly. Besh's article went viral across the galactic networks. Other journalists started investigating the consortium's history and found decades of suppressed information. They had been hiding research about the psychological benefits of traditional cooking. They had lobbied for laws that made real cooking nearly impossible, all to protect their profits. Meanwhile, David and his students were being held in a temporary detention area while investigators sorted everything out. Ambassador Holloway was fighting to get them released, but the bureaucracy moved slowly. I am sorry, David told his students. I got you all into this mess. You gave us something worth fighting for, Realis said. She was not trembling anymore. I was scared of everything before your class. Now I know I can handle heat and knives and even exploding soup. That is worth detention. Gorth clicked in agreement. My hive has started cooking together every evening. It has changed how we communicate, how we bond. You cannot put a price on that. Lynn swirled thoughtfully. The consortium is afraid because they know the truth. Once beings remember what real food tastes like, they will never go back to synthesizers. Hours passed. Then a message came through that made everyone stop talking. It was from Calvin. I have testimony to give. Meet me in Cargo Bay 7. Security escorted them to the cargo bay. Calvin stood there alone, looking smaller than David had ever seen him. His 3 eyes were dim. I need to confess something, Calvin said quietly. I reported your activities to the consortium. I told them where you were teaching, when you would be vulnerable. I thought I was protecting the station from dangerous primitive methods. The students gasped. Rila's ears flattened against her head. But I did not know they would try to destroy the symposium, Calvin continued quickly. I never wanted anyone hurt. I just wanted you to fail and leave. What? David asked. Calvin pulled out an old data chip and projected an image. It showed a young version of himself in a real kitchen, surrounded by other young aliens. They were covered in flour and laughing while kneading dough together. I love cooking, Calvin said. It was my passion. But when I graduated, the regulations came. Real kitchens were declared inefficient and dangerous. I had to choose between my career and what I loved. I chose my career. He looked at David's students. And then you came along, teaching them everything I gave up, making them happy in ways I remember being happy. I hated you for it. Keeper Solace entered the cargo bay, moving slowly on her ancient legs. I came to hear this confession as well. Calvin's eyes widened. Keeper, I take full responsibility. The human should not be punished for my mistakes. You are right about that, Solace said. But you are wrong about something else. The regulations you think you had to follow? I never wanted them. My own government pushed them through while I was off-world. When I returned, cooking as I knew it was already gone. She touched the image of young Calvin in his kitchen. I tasted the human's chocolate cake today. For the first time in 800 years, I remembered what food used to mean to my people. What we lost in the name of efficiency. More people arrived at the cargo bay. Other judges, council members, even some consortium representatives who had not been involved in the sabotage. Dr. Yena stepped forward with her research tablets. I have been documenting the health impacts of David's cooking class. The data is conclusive. Students show improved mental health, stronger social bonds, and better overall well-being. This is not just about taste. This is about community and connection. The consortium has been suppressing this kind of research for decades. Besh added, displaying documents across the wall screens. They knew that real cooking created benefits that synthesizers could not replicate. They buried the evidence because it threatened their business model. A vote was called right there in Cargo Bay 7. The station council had to decide, ban David and traditional cooking permanently, or embrace the change and accept the risks. The debate was fierce. Some argued that safety had to come first. Others pointed out that the real danger came from letting corporations control their food supply completely. Rilla stood up to speak. I was the most scared student in David's first class. I thought fire would kill me. But I learned something important. Risk is not the same as danger. Danger is when you do not know what you're doing. Risk is when you try anyway, knowing you might fail, because the reward is worth it. The vote was not even close. 80% approved allowing traditional cooking with proper safety training. The consortium representatives tried to threaten food supply disruptions. But Ambassador Holloway had news for them. Earth is offering to share all our culinary knowledge freely with any species that wants it. Recipes, techniques, equipment designs. No patents, no fees. You no longer control the only option. The consortium executives left in fury, but they were powerless. Their monopoly was broken. That night, David stood in Cargo Bay 7 with his students and watched as the station council officially recognized their cooking class. 6 months after the vote, Station Harmony 7 looked completely different. The sterile white corridors now carried the mixed aromas of a dozen different cooking styles. Ventilation systems had been upgraded. Fire suppression equipment was installed throughout the station. And Cargo Bay 7 no longer existed as abandoned storage space. It was now the Interspecies Culinary Academy, with proper classrooms, industrial kitchens, and students from 40 different worlds. David walked through the main kitchen where Rila was teaching a class on high-temperature cooking for heat-sensitive species. She wore protective gear, but her confidence was absolute. Her students watched nervously as she demonstrated proper pan technique. The key is not to fear the heat, she told them. Respect it, understand it, but do not fear it. In the next room, Calvin was teaching traditional techniques from his own species' cooking history. He had spent months researching recipes that had been forgotten for thousands of years. His 3 eyes shone with joy as he worked with students to recreate dishes from his childhood. My grandmother would not believe this, he told David during a break. Me, teaching the old ways again. She would be proud, David said. Officer Strand had become the station's most popular safety instructor. His class on cooking safety was always full, partly because he was an excellent teacher and partly because he brought samples from his own kitchen to share. Remember, he told his current class, a small fire is not a disaster. It is a learning opportunity. Stay calm, cut the oxygen, move on. Dr. Yena had published her research in major medical journals across the galaxy. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of other stations requested her help setting up similar programs. She discovered that cooking classes reduced crime, improved mental health, and created stronger communities wherever they were introduced. We evolved to work with our hands, she explained to David, to create things, to share them. Synthesizers took that away. You gave it back. The twins, Nix and Tox, ran a successful business designing safe cooking equipment for species with unique needs. Their inventions included temperature-controlled surfaces for heat-sensitive beings, low-gravity cooking systems, and specialized tools for species with non-standard appendages. We finally found a good use for our chemistry knowledge, Tox said, making cooking safer and more accessible. Gorth had become something of a celebrity. His hive's adoption of communal cooking had sparked interest across the galaxy. Insectoid species that had never considered food as anything more than fuel were now experimenting with flavors and techniques. The hive mind is different now, Gorth explained to a documentary crew. We share more than just information. We share experiences, emotions, joy, all because of cooking together. Lin had pioneered an entirely new field called aromatic cuisine for incorporeal beings. Gas-based species could now participate in cooking culture by creating complex scent compositions and flavor atmospheres. We were left out of food culture for so long, Lin said. Now we have our own traditions. Besh won 3 major journalism awards for his investigation of the consortium. His reporting led to regulatory reforms across multiple sectors. The food synthesizer companies still existed, but they no longer held monopoly power. Truth always matters, Besh told David. But sometimes it takes someone willing to break rules to expose it. Keeper Solace had created a foundation dedicated to preserving culinary traditions across the galaxy. She traveled to distant worlds, documenting ancient recipes and techniques before they were completely forgotten. I wasted 800 years thinking efficiency was wisdom, she told David during one of her visits to the station. Now I spend my time remembering what we lost and teaching the young what they never knew existed. Ambassador Holloway had been promoted instead of fired. Earth's free sharing of culinary knowledge had created goodwill that diplomats could never have achieved through traditional channels. Cooking did more for human relations in 6 months than a century of treaties, she said. People trust you more when you feed them. Restaurants serving real cooked food appeared throughout the station. Some specialized in Earth cuisine, others in rediscovered recipes from alien cultures. The most popular was a small place run by one of David's former students, serving fusion dishes that combined techniques from multiple species. The station's crime rate dropped by 30%. Domestic disputes decreased. Mental health visits went down while community gatherings increased. The cooking classes had created social bonds that made the entire station function better. Not everything was perfect. There were still accidents. Burns happened regularly. Grease fires occurred weekly. One memorable incident involved a student who tried to cook with plasma and nearly vaporized an entire kitchen. But the station had learned to handle these risks. Emergency responders trained for cooking-related incidents. Insurance policies were developed. Safety standards evolved based on real experience rather than theoretical fear. David stood in his classroom facing a new group of nervous students. Among them was a young human woman who had grown up on synthesized food and never learned to cook. She reminded him of himself 6 months ago, terrified but determined. "Welcome to Introduction to Real Cooking," David said. "Before we start, I need to be honest with you. This will be messy. You will burn things. You might burn yourself. You will make mistakes and waste ingredients and create disasters." The students looked worried. The young human woman raised her hand. "Then why do it?" David smiled and pulled out ingredients for a simple dish. Because cooking is not about perfection. It is about bringing people together, taking risks, and creating something with your own hands. It is about turning ingredients into memories, meals into moments, and strangers into communities. He lit the burner, and the flame appeared. None of the students ran. "Now," David said, "who is ready to play with fire?" Every hand went up. As the class began chopping vegetables, the station-wide communication system chimed with an alert. Another small kitchen fire in Sector 12. The response was calm and practiced. Officer Strand's voice came over the speakers. Attention Sector 12. Fire reported in residential kitchen, Unit 47. Response team is on the way. Remember, folks, a little smoke means someone is learning. Let them cook. In kitchens across the station, beings from 40 species were making meals, learning techniques, building friendships. The consortium tried to compete by making their synthesizers more efficient, but they missed the point entirely. Efficiency was never what people wanted. They wanted connection. They wanted to create. They wanted to share something made with their own hands. David taught his class while similar classes happened in dozens of other rooms. Calvin walked past and waved, his arms full of fresh herbs from the station's new gardens. Dr. Yenna documented everything for her ongoing research. Besh recorded footage for his latest story about how food was changing galactic culture. And somewhere in deep space, other stations were watching and wondering if just maybe, they had given up something important when they chose efficiency over experience. The cooking revolution was just beginning. David had started it with one simple grilled cheese sandwich. Now, it was spreading across the galaxy, one meal at a time. The smell of bread baking filled the corridor. Someone laughed as a sauce boiled over. A timer chimed in a distant kitchen. And throughout Station Harmony 7, people were learning that the best things in life require a little heat, a little risk, and a willingness to make a mess. Because sometimes chaos is exactly what you need.